the Nicki Minaj.
Yeah, performing in Jeddah, right?
What are your takeaways?
Etika, popular YouTuber and streamer, has been found dead after missing for nearly a week.
Anybody, man, whether it was Nicki Minaj
or Beyonce or Katy Perry,
Dua Lipa, any of these, people.
As kind of an example of a YouTube star, young, and had a huge following.
Praying in public is not. This is the thing.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Eddie, it's good to be back with you, man.
It's good to have you back.
MashaAllah.
Last time we were talking about Khabib and Conor and giving them some great advice, huh?
Yeah. MashaAllah, man, I very seldomly actually look at anything that anyone posts from me on YouTube. But I did look at that video, and I looked at the comments, and I think some people in the comments assume me to have been a little judgmental. And I want to clarify that I wasn't judging Khabib for jumping out of the cage, and what happened could have happened to any of us in terms of losing control. And I mean, I understand that we are emotional, especially in battle, especially in combat. I was just saying that it would have been more prophetic. It would have been more becoming of a Muslim to keep control. But I wasn't saying, bad Khabib, bad. No. How could I criticize Khabib for making mistakes that I've made in my own life?
When I saw you last time, we saw each other at the airport. Were you in combat with yourself? Like many people, I mean, alhamdulillah, you sat there, you prayed, Fajr in the airport. Many people, it's very difficult. You have to struggle. You have to, do you find yourself, or just you gotten to the point where it's just easy now?
Alhamdulillah, man. Praying in public is not difficult for me. It depends on. I mean, we were in Chicago.
Yeah.
If we were in Texas, what I'm saying, maybe I would have prayed before I got to the airport, or maybe I would have looked for a more private place to pray. But usually, I'm not very concerned about my safety when praying in public. But it can get. Once I was in Iowa, and I was driving to Denver, and I pulled over at a gas station in Iowa, as I mentioned, and I was praying maybe Maghrib and Isha or something like that, and a man who was observing me from a distance came really close to me, and kind of got so close to me that I could smell his breath as I was praying. And I did not break my prayer. I finished my prayer.
Yeah.
And when I finished, I asked him, I said, man, can I help you with something? He said, I've never really seen a Muslim before. And I said, well, you're looking at one. He said, I just want you to know, just because I'm white and I live in this rural area, I don't believe everything that Fox News says.
MashaAllah. And
then he walked away. You know what I'm saying? So I have been in I've had some close encounters, but usually praying in public is not, it's not something that, I'm too concerned about.
This is what I usually tell people when they ask me, are you Muslim? I like defining, what do you mean by Muslim? Is it about what definition? What Fox News gives, or someone else, or do you mean someone who then I'll go and define. I'll say, or do you mean someone who's trying to live a good, wholesome, morally upright life, believing in only one God, and trying to do everything to please that Creator, the one God. And I say, if you mean by that, then I say, yeah, that's who I am, right? Because people have this misnotion. They have, obviously, they think Muslim, other, and all these other things that come along with it, of negativity.
I think some people, almost in a knee-jerk way, just associate Islam with everything negative.
Yeah.
And with everything foreign. So maybe seeing somebody like you, now you are Bosnian.
Yeah.
But, to somebody walking down the street, you probably just look like, a Caucasian American man. When you say you're a Muslim, maybe even the visual creates a paradigm shift where they're like, you're Muslim? Because they're accustomed to images that strike them as foreign.
Yes.
And for people that have a limited perspective, foreign equals dangerous. If it's foreign, it's something I don't understand. something kind of inscrutable, something I can't make sense of, something, covered and shrouded in a kind of mystery.
Yeah.
But when you see something that outwardly is something you can understand, but is actually telling you, I am Muslim, it forces you to confront, some of those biases and prejudices.
Do you think when people see us praying, when they see you praying, it's a good source of dawah? Do you think the heart and soul connects to that?
I think, honestly, I think most of us, whether we see somebody praying, meditating, I think when you see somebody in the midst of chaos, trying to have a private moment with self even, but even superior to that with God, trying to have a private moment, I think people look at that and they think, I need a private moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of us, our lives are just medleys of meaningless activity, going from one thing to the next thing, one thing to the next thing. And when you see somebody doing something very intentional, the thing about our prayer that I think strikes people is how intentional it is. You have to find the direction of Mecca. You have to actually know that you're in a state of ritual purity. You have to recite Surah Al-Fatiha, the first chapter of the Qur'an, the opening. You have to recite another surah. You have to bow. Mm-hmm. And even when you bow, depending on your how you've learned to pray, your back should be at a certain angle, either slightly like this, or slightly up, or straight. And you have to come back to i'tidal. You have to come back to standing, straight up. Then you have to go and you have to prostrate and take the highest part of your anatomy, press it against the floor. All of this is very, very intentional. Of course, we all struggle with khushu' or reverence and presence in our prayer, but the prayer itself, to somebody, looking or observing, it appears very intentional. And I think people naturally admire that.
It's powerful.
It's very powerful. Especially when you see people doing it in congregation, doing it in unison.
Yeah. So hopefully we get people motivated, not to fear, to actually, it can kind of be intimidating. You can be scared, but I brought this up to motivate, to get. And how do you, what do you like to say to people who are kind of timid now? Now it's like time. You have that window of opportunity. It's about to pass. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the heavens and earth, out of his mercy, he's allowed you to combine prayers. He's allowed you to, there's some leniency there. But at the end, you cannot miss a prayer. So sometimes people are so much more scared about what other people think and they're going to say, and the time has flown. And now you have more fear of the people instead of, love for your creator.
لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. There's no obedience to any creature in disobedience to the creator. And, I don't want to make light of legitimate fear. Young people, women, even, men that are non-confrontational and fear being physically assaulted, accosted. I don't want to make light of that just because that's not a fear that I have.
Yeah.
You might have a person that is legitimately afraid, legitimately scared. And, there are concessions that can be made for that. We can speak freely on your show, right?
Sure.
But of course, even in the ahkam of jihad, in the rulings about legitimate martial struggle, there are certain rulings that apply that if a person is afraid, they can pray while mounted. If they're afraid that, maybe getting off of my mount and praying I could be attacked or I could be assaulted, they could pray while mounted. And even if they don't face the direction of the Qibla, even if they're on their mount, horse, camel, in our time, a car, a truck, an airplane, but they're in a state of battle and they're afraid for their life, any direction that they face while praying, the prayer would still be accepted. So my point is that in our religious law, things can change because of legitimate fear. When a person is afraid, like I'm afraid that something will happen to me. So I don't want to make light of that. But in many instances, there's nothing to be afraid of. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. But you have to come to that realization on your own.
You got to be a warrior.
You got to be a warrior. You got to come to that realization on your own.
Can we say that, warrior?
Yeah. You
is Mujahid a warrior?
Mujahid is a warrior.
I was listening. I was very. There's a. What's his name? Jocko Jenkins. What's the guy's name? Jocko Jenkins.
The former soldier.
Yeah, he's a former special forces soldier. And have you heard of him? No. And he has a good book. It's for kids. And it's teaching kids to live by a certain code. And he was using these words, And I was thinking about, he was using words, teaching kids to be warriors. And then synonymous with the warrior, what he was teaching them to be was to be of noble character, to, you know, get up, to be disciplined, and all these good traits that, like, we're scared.
And this is a part of, and it's not only.
I said, look at this guy. He's teaching this kid. If we were writing this book,
oh man, people would say that we were encouraging our kids to be terrorists or something like that. And it's strange because it's not just Muslims. Every human culture esteems courage as a virtue.
Yeah.
Every human culture esteems fortitude as a virtue. Every human culture esteems bravery as a virtue. Putting yourself in a position where you're risking something for what you believe in.
Yeah.
We all esteem that. And even you know, every time I'm talking to a neighbor, a colleague, I say, what about Memorial Day? What about Veterans Day? We're celebrating our American warriors. We're celebrating American warriors. Now, we won't go into a political conversation about what those warriors have fought for, you know, American imperialism, slavery, etc. But we're esteeming American warriors because in every culture, people that are willing to sacrifice something or risk something in order to stand for what they believe in, these are people that we esteem and that we respect. And we see as embodying values that we hold sacred. And as Muslims, we shouldn't be ashamed about that. Forgive me for giving you a mouthful, but I think one of the reasons why is that our tradition is being defined in a context that is dominated by Christianity. And when you look at Christian understandings of Jesus, peace be upon him, he was everything besides a noble warrior. Everything besides that. So you'll find that it's very hard for them to reconcile the idea of being God conscious with being a warrior.
Yeah.
But in other cultures, they don't have that issue. So like a lot of, in Eastern, the samurai is a disciplined, God conscious warrior.
Yes.
In a lot of the Hindu creation myths, the people esteemed for having virtue, they're warriors. So our tradition, being a warrior is not inconsistent with being humble or being modest or being a God conscious or even being a peaceful person. Being a warrior is actually very consonant and consistent with all of those things.
Because we got such beautiful words. Muslim, one who submits to the will of the creator of the heavens and earth, just like Jesus and all the other prophets. People are scared now to identify as being a Muslim. Jihad, to struggle and strive, to submit to your creator, to do what's right, to do what's morally right, to stay away from what's evil. As soon as you say jihad, it's like,
people think holy war.
Yeah.
An attempt to establish a theocracy,
which it doesn't. I mean, jihad doesn't mean holy war. There's
not
nothing
even holy about war.
Yeah. Yeah. So now you have these terms that others will use, and you're like, hold on, they're
literally hijacking
it from
our terms, and
from the Quran, from the Sunnah,
and they use it usually to spread fear and panic.
Yeah.
And this is why we have to reassume control of our narrative. Tell our own story. That has to be of paramount importance.
There's a story out there. It's connected to some history of the rise of the Ottoman Empire, and it's a hit with not yet Muslims, non-Muslims, and it's on Netflix.
Right.
And you'll see Ertugrul.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Have you seen that?
I saw one episode, which I know I'm completely outing myself as a lame right now. You know what I'm saying?
But that's why people love, because you see a Muslim, you see people out there doing jihad. They're, making justice prevail, and
of course,
and it's a hit film on the Netflix.
There's some things that I think, as a species, and this is something I think true of people in this kind of liberal society, in this kind of, philosophically liberal. We're in deep denial of certain parts of our own natures.
Yeah.
There's a reason why combat sports are always popular. There's a reason why movies that feature violence are always popular, even among people who themselves maybe would never strike anybody, certainly maybe never have even handled a firearm or shot a firearm. There's a reason why, when you hear like rap artists and they are representing a certain kind of masculinity, talking, about guns and talking about wealth and talking about their conquest with the opposite sex and talking about, there's a reason why, even though I agree that much of that we mentioned is corrupt, there's a reason why it does strike a chord in both men and women, because there's a part of us that honors those things, but we've never seen them represented in an honorable way. And this is what I see in the example of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. But we try to deny them. We try to act as though, that doesn't mean anything to us. No. When you see someone who is capable, when you see someone who is successful, when you see someone who is powerful, when you see someone who is strong, when you see someone who is fearless, there's a part of you that I think on a deep, perhaps even primordial level, you admire that. You admire it. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe it's difficult to kind of separate it from the corrupt expression of it, that you're seeing. Yeah. Because it's connected with sin and iniquity and evil and bravado and all kinds of harm that's being caused to other people. But the core virtue being expressed there, we respect it.
Yeah, I point to this because it's hard nowadays to bring something to light that you can point towards, that now it strikes some kind of example, for instance, that people can take away, and that just humanity has become, and I focus on it becoming a number one hit with not yet Muslims, non-Muslims out there.
Yeah, of course.
So it's not just Muslims, and they wouldn't have it on Netflix if it was something that wasn't something good. I'm sorry, as far as Islamically, now that you can point towards when people, for instance, the demasculinization of men, you watch this and you see when men were men. Right? And women at the same time showing respect towards women, how the Muslims treated women, how women treated also respecting the men, how just as a society they were functioning, and they were striving for justice and peace, and things were very more harmonious, as opposed to things that just been being destroyed little by little nowadays.
I think that when you look at those older and perhaps even a little romantic depictions of the past, they just remind you of a time when things were more ordered. Yeah. A man had a certain role. There was a certain ideal that he was expected to live up to. Or even in not living up to it, he was expected to, pay homage or to honor this ideal of being a man. There was a certain ideal that a woman was expected to live up to. Yeah. And even if she didn't conform to it, she would either see herself as something unique but usually she still respected a certain ideal of femininity, a certain ideal of maternality, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that, yes, maybe we feel that we've broken free of these expectations of conformity, but we often don't see that it's those expectations that give a culture direction. That whether you like it or not, you can say it's rigid and does not describe me in the fullness of my reality, sure. But those things give a culture direction. Yeah. We know what we honor. We know what we esteem. We know about where we want to go. So it's easy for us to believe in ourselves. Right now we have this kind of, everybody is defining themselves. Everything is so self-referential, me, what I think. And yes, maybe it feels good, but it won't go anywhere. Yeah. A culture like that will never be ascendant. It will never be exemplary for anybody else. Mm-hmm. It'll just be chaotic, really. And maybe we're all, farihun, like Allah says, we're all rejoicing about what we have, but collectively, you can't move with no ideals. You just can't do that. Yeah.
A couple of things that are hot topics that I wanted to get your feedback on. One was the Nicki Minaj.
Yeah, performing in Jeddah, right?
What are your takeaways?
I don't.
You know who Nicki Minaj is?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I do. On the one hand, this is a recording artist performing at a venue in a city in the Muslim world. Yeah. Somehow I think we have greater expectations of Saudi Arabia, that they somehow police or they somehow regulate the kinds of entertainment, the kinds of outlets that their populace can enjoy. For my part, her being there is not. Her being there is just like her being in New York, Paris, Chicago, Cairo, Dubai, Abu Dhabi. Jeddah is not a part of the haram. Jeddah is not a sanctuary, for Muslims. So
this was in Jeddah.
This is in Jeddah.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody says she's going to perform in Mecca Mukarramah, it's like, wait.
But you can't think like who would organize something like this. I just
but my point is, this being esteemed as kind of like we are arriving, we are progressive, we are. It's so unfortunate to see people who now locate their value in somebody else seeing them as progressive. To say that, Nicki Minaj is performing in a place and people who want this performance can go see this performance. People who would morally be outraged by the performance will stay away from the performance. And the people who are morally outraged by it, they want to raise their voices and encourage other people not to go. All of that is well within everybody's right. Right? All of that is well within everybody's right. But for people to posit this as some kind of a rival in, we are now a thoroughly first world country. We are progressive.
Is this to fit in?
We are liberal. I think it's definitely to fit in.
Yeah.
It's sad to see, because you think to yourself, with a society that has been given the material riches that many of the countries in the Gulf have been given.
Yeah.
If you don't have any self-esteem now,
where's the izzah?
If you don't have any izzah now, and you have, a commodity that the world is in need of in terms of the petrol.
Yeah.
Goodness, man. It's almost like it's disheartening. But I also recognize they must be given, permission to own their own historical experience.
It reminds me, can we see come into fruition the statement from, is it Umar radiallahu anhu, where he talked about,
if you try to seek izzah through any other means other than the deen of Allah, Allah will debase you. That's what Sayyidina Umar said.
Can we connect that to this?
If you try to seek izzah through you try to seek honor or dignity through any other means other than the deen of Allah, Allah will debase you. And it's almost like that should be, that warning should be issued, not out of condemnation and criticism, but out of love. Meaning, this is not the way. Like, right now, you all could be establishing, and I get in terms of that munafasa, or that competitiveness. Muslims, and let me just kind of go into this a little bit. Our religion, one of the, I'm not going to call it, it's not a bad consequence, but it's just a consequence. In the Christian understanding of the ending of Jesus Christ, of course, not our understanding, right? In our understanding and the Jewish understanding, a Messiah is always victorious. That's very interesting. In the Jewish understanding and the Muslim understanding, a Messiah is given victory by God. However, in the Christian understanding of the end of the life of Christ, he dies being crucified. In their understanding, we know that he was not crucified. In the Muslim understanding of the end of the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may God bless him and grant him peace, he dies as the sovereign leader of all of Arabia. That for us kind of indicates that we are supposed to be a success. We, associate a certain amount of worldly ascendancy, a certain amount of worldly dominance with God being pleased with us sometimes. And I think this is something we do that can get us into some trouble. So a lot of the Muslims in the Emirates, in Saudi, they just want to compete with the West. Meaning, we don't want to be seen as not being on par with them. We don't want to be seen as being less than. But we have to remind them that you have to change the terms of the game. You will never be able to win playing somebody else's game. They're creating the game. They're creating the terms. You have to somehow summon the confidence to play your own game. Then you will be a winner. And your game can be culturally inspiring. It can be beautiful. It can be dignified. It can be peaceful. It can be your own, expression of progressive. It can be all of that, but you must define it for yourself. I remember being in Abu Dhabi, and I went to the Louvre, Abu Dhabi, and I thought to myself, even if you wanted to get into, collecting and displaying fine art, why would you name your museum the Louvre? A museum that already exists in Paris. Because it's a culture of imitation.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you, even if you wanted to do this on your own terms, you could have said, you know what, we're going to create a fine art museum par excellence, on par with anything in the world. And it will feature Islamic calligraphy. It will feature, we're going to do this our way.
Yeah.
But no, you call it the Louvre Abu Dhabi, and then you pay $100 million for a picture of Jesus. If you don't have it,
mm-hmm.
you don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have it, you don't have it.
Yeah. Well, this is. I mean, I look at this for for the youth and just those God conscious people in general. Muslims to know there was a famous statement that the biggest trick that the devil ever played on mankind was to convince him that he doesn't exist. Have you heard this?
I have heard this.
So you see these things, and then you also look at the prophetic, statements, authentic statements from the Prophet ﷺ, and you see a lot of these things. Now this is more proof upon proof that these things are coming to fruition. You start to look, and you're like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
these things are starting to happen.
Yeah.
There's minor signs and
major signs.
Yeah, you see that?
Yeah, I see it, man.
Yeah. And then you see where happiness truly is, because then you see people like Loon, what's his name, Napoleon, many of these people who came from that lifestyle, and they come out and they, Allah exposes what's in there. I mean, many of us have experienced many of those things. We know people. And you see, there's nothing there.
Yeah, these are the highlights. People that
highlights.
Are.
It's empty. It's fake.
In a certain world where a lot of people would like to be, and even if that world is empty and fake, it's still intoxicating.
Yeah.
In the same way that cocaine and being addicted to cocaine, it's an empty proposition. You're not gonna win, but it's still intoxicating. And for a brief moment, it can fill a person with a kind of excitement that for many of us might be unimaginable. The kind of excitement, but it takes a special person that in the midst of that can actually see through to its core, right? There's so many places in the Qur'an where Allah addresses the ulul albab, the people of innermost core, people that have been given insight, people that can kind of see into things for what they really are. So people like Loon and Brother Napoleon and and not just them. We can't just focus on rappers. Other people that they were in the middle of a culture that intoxicates, anesthetizes in terms of numbs you to feeling anything of the spiritual, and they still reached and strove for the spiritual. These people I think are heroic in many ways.
Yeah. So this was all kind of an introduction. Now let's get to the main plate now.
What's up?
Because all of this leads to what this individual that we're gonna react to next, using this as kind of an example of a YouTube star, young, and had a huge following. So I want to just go ahead and let this play, and then get your reaction, because this is also a growing trend. People look up to people like this, and then you see hold on, he had the followers, he's got some fame, but then at the end, what happens?
Etika, popular YouTuber and streamer, has been found dead after missing for nearly a week. Etika, whose real name is Desmond, went missing on June 19th after uploading an 8-minute-long video titled "I'm Sorry" that appeared to be a goodbye.
I shouldn't have pushed so many people away.
The video, which has since been deleted by YouTube, contained a lengthy description that read in part, "I'm sorry I never sought help for myself. My time ends now, but if there is a way for me to, I'll send you all as many blessings as I can from the other side." Following the video on June 20th, the NYPD shared they were looking for Etika. On June 22nd, the New York Post reported his personal belongings were found along Manhattan Bridge. On the evening of June 24th, police discovered a body in Manhattan's East River. The NYPD tweeted on June 25th, "We regret to inform that Desmond, aka Etika, has been found deceased. His cause of death is unknown at this time." The online community began sharing condolences, including his former girlfriend Alice, who tweeted, "I want his funeral to be as big as his personality, his heart, and his spirit. I loved him. He is finally at peace." Etika's struggles became a major concern for fans over the past year.
I said we're here for your mental health. We want to make sure you're all right.
Well, you're not allowed in my apartment. No, go home. I don't want to open the door.
In April, police detained him over mental health concerns, which he streamed on Instagram Live.
Desmond, you need to open the door so that EMS can look at you.
I'm
scared for your safety, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah, I'm not going to open the door, sir.
In May, he returned to YouTube with a new channel.
Do I have to explain necessarily what happened? I missed out on so many things while I was gone in my little hiatuses to you know where.
Etika began creating videos in 2012 and was best known for his reaction and gaming-related videos.
What's going on?
Very popular. Have you ever heard of him?
Never heard of him.
I never heard of him, but it was brought to my attention, and it just stands out because he's a young guy. You know, it's a very sad situation, but this is what's happening. What second leading killer in the world is suicide?
Yeah, they said that, we're seeing rates of anxiety and depression that are just off the charts, man. And, many people suspect that, social media, there's a direct correlation to our exposure to social media and these rising rates of anxiety and depression. That's sad, man.
So when you see this many times, and there are, mental health issues are something that's legitimate, people struggle with, but never is it mentioned you have spiritual health issues.
Yeah, no, I think,
how much does that play a role?
Oh, man, they're all interconnected.
Yeah.
I think that, when we talk about them as though we're talking about, distinct and separate entities, your spiritual health, your mental health, your physical health, they're all connected. And when I saw this report by Entertainment today, whatever the channel was you were showing, it just reminded me that when you are performing for an audience, and I think this is something that every performer runs this risk, whether they are some blogger or some kind of YouTube video creator, or a person that performs on big stages in front of auditoriums, or even a person that gives religious talks like what I do. There is a tendency to conflate or put together the applause of the audience with actually being okay. As long as the audience is applauding me, because they clearly think that I'm okay because they're clapping for me. They clearly esteem me because they're coming up and greeting me after the performance has finished. But what do I think about myself? Have I checked in with where I am, how I'm feeling, what I'm doing, how my heart is in the midst of all of this? Sometimes this is not even on the agenda. And you can find a person, Kate Spade, for instance, man, beloved to people and millions of dollars. Anthony Bourdain, beloved to people, living a life that everybody would say, that's the real life, most interesting man in the world. Traveling and living among, different cultures and trying different foods and having all of this filmed. And who could ask for a more, quote unquote, fulfilling life than what Tony Bourdain had? But Allah says, "Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub." Is it something other than the remembrance of God that gives hearts rest?
Yes.
This is what actually makes a person feel at peace, is being in touch with their source, being in touch with their creator. Everything else could just really be window dressing.
Yeah.
But there's actually nothing in the building. There's nothing in there.
Empty,
there's nothing in the building is empty.
You mentioned,
but the window dressing
are
is
you talking about
very,
that famous
captivating.
chef Anthony Bourdain?
Anthony Bourdain killed himself.
Yeah. That was someone also. It wasn't apparent from the outside. You would think he was actually. I know him personally because he would come to the train with me and my family.
Really?
He would take classes of jiu-jitsu. He started training, so every time he was in Chicago, we were his go-to for
no kidding.
training.
And he seemed completely fine.
Yeah, but then it goes back to, I think, of the last and final messenger sent to mankind, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. He said that there's a morsel of flesh in the body. If it's sound, then the whole body is sound.
Sadaqa Rasulullahi alayhi salatu wassalam. The messenger of God has spoken the truth.
So, because we know there's components for health. I mean, lifestyle, what you're eating, how you sleep, all these things,
All these
right?
things.
But now the main thing, would you say, this is the heart, man?
The heart. And the other thing is
And now we're not talking about the physical heart. What do you when you hear this hadith? For the layman,
we're talking about the essence of the human being.
The essence of the human being.
Essence of the human being. That's the heart that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes referred to as the spiritual heart.
Yeah.
The essence of the human being, the seat of your personhood.
But I can't touch it or feel it, brother. What do you?
But it's there.
It's there.
It's there. And the Prophet also said, if it's corrupt, the entire person is corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
If it's corrupt, everything is corrupt.
Yeah.
The essence of the human being, the seat of your personhood. And many of us, we just haven't invested in it. And sometimes these performances, and I'm addressing myself and everyone else that has a very public job, sometimes these performances can be the biggest distraction to actually getting to that mudgha, getting to that lump of flesh. Getting to that morsel of flesh and checking to see that it's sound.
Mm-hmm. This is an example of many. Anthony Bourdain is for some of the older generation. You had Robin Williams. You have many people out there. And it doesn't exclude that you can be someone also who's practicing the Deen Islam. You're going through challenge, but at the end, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. I like to compare it. That there's that hope that, they did studies with mice where they had them in a box. One was fully closed and the other one was slightly open so they can see the light at the end. And they were trying to get out. And they found that the ones with the light, they still had hope. And these ended up they ended up living living the other ones by like 30 times more or something.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think, and the other thing too, when you believe in God, you know that you're not ultimately in control.
Yeah.
You see, I think one of the when I look at, suicide, and I'm not an expert by any stretch, there are people that are much more qualified to talk about this than I. I'm speaking just as a person that has just my religious background, my training, and that's kind of the toolkit that I work out of. But I think there's also this idea of a person believing that they're ultimately in control of this.
Yeah, that drive you crazy, man.
That'll drive you crazy if you believe you're ultimately in control of this. Part of what we have in believing in God is that al-urwatul wuthqa, that handhold, that firm grasp that doesn't break, as Allah describes it, as God describes it. So that no matter what is going on, no matter what is happening, we believe Allah is the author of my reality and Allah is with me. Allah didn't bring me this far to leave me.
Yes. Allah
brought me this far and Allah will bring me through it. And that's something that people who actually have strong faith, they can rely upon that. I often teach about, like, you look at the story of Yusuf. Yusuf went through a lot. Joseph went through a lot, from being betrayed by, his brothers, to being sold into slavery, to being sexually assaulted, to being imprisoned in spite of his known innocence, to being forgotten about fellow inmates that he served. He went through a lot, to getting out of prison but still being estranged from his family. I mean, he went through a lot, to reconnecting with his family in a highly unusual way. He went through a lot. But what gave him the ability to go through it was that he knew that all of it was connected to meaning. They say the difference between suffering and sacrifice is meaning. A person suffering, they don't see any meaning in what they're experiencing. They just see it as completely haphazard. Man, why is it happening to me?
But Islam gives you the meaning.
The meaning is, it's sacrifice.
Yeah.
It's just sacrifice. إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّ الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرُهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. God says, only the patient will reap their reward with no reckoning, meaning only the patient are going to get their reward on the day of judgment. How will God make you one of those patient people without giving you some hardships, without giving you some trials, without giving you some afflictions? So you see all of it as having meaning and entailing sacrifice that I have to go through to get to where God wants me to be. And when you have that, it buoys you. It gives you a special kind of, a fortitude. When you don't have that, you're really on your own. And وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Everything we need is in the Qur'an.
Yeah.
The human being has been created weak. So if you believe you're on your own, that means you feel that you're left to your own devices, and God is telling you, you are weak. Any of us left to our own devices, we might falter, we might succumb, we might cave. But if we rely on God, now you're that's Gibraltar. You're on something solid.
That qadr, when you relying on that qadr, where you've done everything in your power, but at the end it's a relief. It's out of my control.
It's out of my control, and this is what gives you ease, relief. That it's whatever God wants.
Yeah.
It's whatever God wants. It's whatever God wants.
Yeah.
And the better your relationship with God, the better construction you're able to put on whatever your reality is. I read something where a person was telling a person that was striving for something but didn't realize what they were striving for, know that your Lord has not denied you anything out of stinginess, because your Lord is not stingy.
Yeah. I get amazed when you go into some of these self-help, these gurus out there, motivational speakers, the Tony Robbins, the many that are out there that people pay thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to go and get advice from. And many of them, you hear them repeating some of the same things as if they stole it from the Quran and Sunnah. And I remember one statement by one of them. He's saying to grow, you have to suffer. So to grow, you have to suffer.
Yo, check this out, man. Check this out, Eddie, man. I was sitting with a friend of mine, and he's an accomplished poet, but he had recently decided to write a screenplay for a movie. And I was asking him, how was it going? What's up? And he said, man, it's one of the most spiritual things I've ever done. And I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, how? He said, well, I have these characters, and I'm kind of like in control of their destinies. I write their stories. And if I want to expose any virtue in a character, I have to give them trials that they overcome. That's the only way that I can expose a virtue in any of the characters to the viewing audience, is that I have to give them hardships, and I have to show them overcoming those hardships. That's how you see their virtue. I'm still stuck on stupid. I'm like, he's like, such is the case of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with us. If Allah wants to make any of our virtues known, he gives us trials that we have to overcome. Or he gives us blessing that we have to be thankful for. There's no in between. You're either in a state of ni'mah, for which you have to give thanks, shukr, gratitude, or you're in a state of ibtila, test, adversity, in which you have to be patient. And if you do either of those, in the corresponding circumstance, test or blessing, you have passed the test. If you don't, doesn't mean that you should give up. There's just more for you to learn. It's just more for you to learn. And, some of what we're thankful for as we're learning, as we're making mistakes, as we're accumulating the cuts and the bruises and the scrapes, is that God is allowing me to stay alive long enough to learn from my mistakes, man. I'm just thankful to God for keeping me alive, man, so that I can learn from some of my mistakes and try to get better. And I'm thankful to all of the people that are loving me through my mistakes, man, especially my wife, man.
You see that the more you take the time, you get to know your deen, you study it, you see all of the blessings that are in it. You deprive yourself of it if you don't take the time to learn these tools that are there to help get you through the challenges of life. They're in the deen. They're in Islam.
All of them are there, man. And this is why the Prophet is a human being. Allah said, it's beautiful, man. Whenever I come and sit with you, man, there's just so much pouring out. There's so much coming out. I like Eddie, and there's so much pouring out. But, it's a common rebuttal, a common reply to many prophets. You guys are just human beings like basharun mithluna. You're a human being just like us. But God intentionally makes the messengers human beings so we can see how people of exemplary faith deal with the ups and downs of life, deal with loss, deal with blessing, deal with death, deal with bereavement, deal with poverty, deal with hardships, deal with sickness, deal with affliction. God wants us to see this is how a man or woman of faith should deal with those things. If the messengers were angels, then we wouldn't be able to see that. you know, we wouldn't be able to see that.
Yeah.
So it's like that's part of why the messengers are human examples, because they have to deal with human things, man.
Yeah.
The ups and downs of life. We go up and we go down. That's just the rhythm of life, man.
If you see someone like Etika, or someone like Anthony Bourdain, or the Robbins, the actor, if they had these tools, for instance, the one that comes to mind, and you can go ahead and elaborate on it, where the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, where he said all of the affairs for the believer are good. You think, how are they good? You know, if some good touches him, he's thankful to Allah. And if some evil,
he's patient.
Yeah.
And so the whole
how?
thing,
But someone says, how is that possible? How are all the affairs good? How would you break this down?
A lot
and
of
if he had that, that tool, those tools, those resources.
See, a lot of this, and this is why, you know, love of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is an important aspect of our faith. A lot of this stuff might be difficult to digest if we're just thinking about this like, you know, me trying to convince somebody that patience is a good thing. No, there has to be a person that you esteem, that you love, that you see how they ended, that I can point to and say, look at how they dealt with this. Ibrahim died, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, his son. How did the Prophet deal with it? Yes, there were some tears. There were, you know, the Prophet wasn't robotic. He wasn't a person that put on this fake face of like, oh, it's all good. You know, my son just died, but it's cool. You know, he wasn't a robotic person. But you see in his character the benefit of having patience. And this is what the way you do it is through, you know, what's called mimesis. So you do it through wanting to emulate somebody that you see as having triumphed in life, that you see as like, they had hardship and they overcame it, and look at them. And if they can do it, I can do it. I might not be able to convince you. If a person is in the depth of despair, it might be difficult for me to convince them that, well, let me give you some logical theorem as to why you should not feel despair, or why they may say, man, okay, that didn't work. But what I can say is, look at this person. Look at them. Look at how they overcame this. Look at how God blessed them, either in this life or the next life. Don't you want to be like that? Don't you want that? Well, if you want that, you have to take the steps that they took to get there.
Yeah.
You have to put your foot, you have to place your feet in their footsteps, and you can get there. Right? لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Truly, you have in the messenger of God a beautiful example. But you have to be connected to him to want to follow that example.
That's why I kept stressing now, and we're putting it all together now. We mentioned Nicki Minaj. If you're sitting there, you know, wasting your life, wasting your time listening to the likes of, and then taking them as examples, because we're creatures of imitation. You're going to start to imitate, you know, that's your role model at the end of the day. Instead of immersing yourself in this deen and putting, you don't have to be a scholar in the deen, but putting aside time to learn it, to understand it, to be convinced of it, right? To consciously submit your will to Allah through Islam, then now it's night and day.
Different ball game.
Different ball game.
Different ball game. You have it's an experience that one has to open themselves to. You know, again, we are creatures of imitation, and we are creatures of habit. And if you spend your time, you know, when you sit with anybody, could be Nicki, could be Chance the Rapper, could be Yo-Yo Ma, could be other, you know.
May Allah guide them all. I mean, we got love for all of them to come to the deen.
May Allah guide them all. You know, we're not demeaning, you know, these people. We're not.
Even though one thing someone sent me, even though when you look at like someone like Nicki Minaj, you look at their lyrics, they are clearly like elevating themselves like they're a deity next to Allah. The things that you know, people who listen to them, when you read some of their lyrics, it is. You know, man. You know, these are agents for the devil. Like,
I think I said this last time I was on the show. But there's actually a thin line between boasting and showing gratitude.
Yes, I remember that.
I mean, I said there's a thin line. You know, the person boasting, at the very least, they do esteem the blessing. They do think that what I have or what I am or what I can do is a big deal. The mistake they're making is what? They're attributing that to themselves. It's because of me. It's like Qarun. Qarun had all of this money. and they were saying, thank God for the money you've been inni utituhu ala ilmin indi. Man, I've been given this money because of a certain knowledge that I have. What do you mean, thank God? But for a person to esteem the blessing, you know, I think if we were to give them if I were to sit with somebody like a Nicki Minaj or Kanye or any you know, talented person, I feel bad when we just pick on people in the hip hop community.
Yeah. Let's pick a rock star.
Yeah, right. They're not the only arrogant people.
No,
it's not just
you
people
got
in the
those
hip-hop.
also those truckers, the ones who.
There you go. You know,
the
guys from Duck Dynasty. Anybody. You know, if I were to sit with them, you know, my approach probably would be to, you know, offer something constructive to say,
yeah.
you know, you're halfway there, in that, you know, you believe you have something good.
Yeah.
Right. You believe that you're talented. You believe that you're beautiful. You know, what about that hadith of the Prophet? He looks in the mirror. You know, it was only a couple of weeks ago I was reflecting upon this, and I thought to myself, man, how deep, how beautiful. Allahumma ahsin khuluqi kama ahsanta khalqi. Oh Allah, make my character beautiful like you've made my form beautiful.
Yeah.
The Prophet is not denying the beauty of his outward form. But he's saying what? Number one, the beauty of that outward form was given to me by God. And then he's saying, let's start with the outward, but let's go to something more important, the inward.
Exactly.
Right. Let's start with that. But he's not failing to acknowledge the outward. He's saying, no, God has made me beautiful, and I acknowledge that. But let's use gratitude for that to take us to what? A request for something even more important than that. Yeah. So I would say to any of those people, you know, if you feel like you're attractive, or you feel like you're talented, or you feel like you're creative, you know, you're halfway there in terms of you see a blessing. It would be better if you acknowledge the source of the blessing, even better if you use the blessing in the way that source wants you to.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But the fact that you acknowledge somebody that's completely depressed might be much further from Allah than that. A person that's nothing is good, I'm nothing, I don't have anything, I'm ugly, I don't have any talent, I'm not creative, I'm poor, I'm stupid, I'm dumb. A person like that might be actually further from Allah, because even the blessings that God has given, they don't even esteem.
Yeah.
I ain't got nothing. So if you don't have anything, how can you even acknowledge the source of what you have? You think you don't have anything.
Yeah.
At least these people, they think they have something. So let me tell you where what you have comes from. You do have something. Let's grant that. You got something? Let me tell you about where it comes from. Once you know where it comes from, you honor the one that gave it to you by using it in a way that he's pleased with.
Yeah.
You know
I had the opportunity to interview another well-known legend in the music industry not too long ago, Sinead O'Connor, if you never heard of her.
Yeah, of course, man.
And Sinead O'Connor, she was actually the one who came out to
Conor
McGregor.
She had that. David, right?
Conor McGregor actually had her come out as you know, they had those the people who will sing their song. She performed live, for her ring walk.
Ring walk. Right.
I think it was before she accepted Islam. But anyways, she was giving some advice way back in the day, because she had gone through that industry, scandalous industry, corrupt, cutthroat, just using you, abusing you, and she was trying to give advice. Our sister Sinead O'Connor was giving advice to, I believe, Kate Perry, one of these, and you know, out of love for her. So this is someone that they could take an example, a woman who has come to Islam, who has, you know, experienced the other religions. She has articulated, you know, her position now that she's finally found the purpose of life, and she's a good example that they can.
I'm proud of Sinead.
Yeah,
man.
she took a bold step, you know.
Yeah.
And she's, you know, just look at what life she chose, someone who is also in that industry, because you take it to the end result, where is it going to get you at the end, you know?
But see, you know,
they say that these artists are, since we're talking about just one more point, these artists are actually statistically 17 or 18 times more likely, because they're more depressed. Highlights from the outside, you think it's all glitz and glamour, but they're 17, 18 times more likely to commit suicide. So if you look deep down your side, you know, Nicki Minaj, she's not, you know, there's no happiness really truly in the soul, in the heart.
You know, it would be, you know, I think it might be a little forward for us to say what's in anybody's heart.
Yeah, right? I mean, God knows, but I would say,
it is telling that, you know, people that are in the spotlight and people that everybody is esteeming, everyone loves, everybody wants to be close to, sometimes, they feel the most alienated, man. Because, one thing about the music industry, I think the sports industry, I think many casual fans, they don't separate the talent itself from the industry. There's so like we were talking about last time, the idea of being a martial artist, there's discipline, there's nobility, that the idea of being a prize fighter or fighting in the MMA, your connection to this art, to this craft is being commodified by people whose interest in this is business. People whose interest in this is money. And I think that even that probably produces something where you feel like, I got into this because like maybe I love song or I love art or I love folk music, but to be in the company of so many people that like I am the product that they're selling, that must be dehumanizing in some way. And I think that sometimes suicide or suicidal ideation, it could be a desperate attempt to let the people know there's a human being in here. You just see me as a product, something to be marketed, something to be sold.
Yeah.
People see me as something to be photographed alongside of. Some people see me as something to write to. Some people see me as an object of their lust. Some people, man, there's actually a human being in here. Maybe you'll see that when I take my own life, right? There's a human being in here. I'm not a product. And I think that, in our time, when you have people like regular folks using the term build your brand, man, that's scary to me. Now I speak publicly. Maybe some people, invite me out. I don't think I have much of a following. I'm not on social media or anything like that. And I'm not saying I'm a saint because I'm not on social media. I have my own way. I do some stunting. If my wife would say, she say, no, you're not on social media, but you definitely do some stunting. But I am very wary about making myself into a product. Even the stunting that I do, I hope I'm seen as a human being trying to figure this out. I'm a human being trying to worship Allah. Yes, like anybody else, I need validation. Like anybody else, I have things in myself that I'd like to express, but I don't want to be made into a product. I don't want to be made into a commodity. I'm not into that. I'm a human being. And when you see something from me, I want it to be viewed as something from a human being that hopefully is sincere, hopefully is earnest, and is trying to figure out how to worship his Lord and be in this world. But I'm not doing anything in the interest of building my brand.
Yeah.
I'm not into that. That's too impersonal, automaton and dehumanizing for me. I'm not. And you have regular people now. This will be great for your brand. It makes me feel strange.
Yeah. So separating Nicki Minaj as a person from the acts that she's doing, the immoral acts and the things that obviously go against what she's been actually truly created to do, the life that the creator, the potential that she truly has when she would turn herself to the creator of the heavens and the earth. What do you have to offer? What if not right now in closing, Nicki Minaj, so we don't come off someone's like, oh, you guys judging her, this, that, and that, but actually sending her some love now, because when you share, you care, and now you're sharing with Nicki Minaj, who's potentially tuning in, that what will she gain if she's leaving all this, right? All of this, what she has now with all the stardom and the following.
Anybody, man, whether it was Nicki Minaj
or Beyonce or Katy Perry.
Dua Lipa, any of these, people, or just the sister down the street, man.
Because I can say, look, and I'll hand it over to you, because at the end of the day, and we say this with love, okay? Because at the end of the day, we're gonna die. We're gonna leave this world.
Oh, that's for sure.
And we're not just gonna turn into dust. And if a person continues on, if you disobey your boss at work, you're gonna get fired, right? God Almighty did like Muhammad Ali. He would be, taking the match and he would put it under his hand, and he was reminding himself. He said, man, if I can't bear, Muhammad, if you can't bear this fire, how are you going to bear the hellfire? So if a person, we know God Almighty is the most loving, the most merciful. If Nicki Minaj She changed her ways, and she came and she's humbly submitted to the one God, the same God Jesus worshipped, and Moses and Abraham, and she humbly submitted to their Creator. Those bad deeds can turn into good deeds, right?
Yeah,
what would you offer? What can you offer her to have her thinking a panacea?
To anybody, man. Like I said, man, whether it was Nicki, whether it was Dua Lipa, whether it was Katy Perry, whether it was, the sister down the street, whether it was
the stripper in the nightclub,
the executive, the brother selling drugs, the corrupt politician, anybody. I would say, man, that God intends that we have a relationship with Him, and wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you are not excluded from that, and that you can turn to God, and God will turn towards you. If you strive to build that relationship, God promises you that لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا, we will guide them to our ways. God will guide you. And I would just start by reminding them that God is close. فَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. If my servants ask about me, then tell them that I'm close. I think one of the mistakes that we often make with people just in different kinds of adverse circumstances, and we start talking about their behavior right away. Why you wearing this? Why you saying this? Why you selling this? Why you doing this? And it's like, even though I know we mean well, we could be shooting ourselves in the foot. We should probably just be talking to them about Allah. God is there. God is merciful. God is forgiving. When you have a relationship with God, you will find fulfillment. You will find contentment. You will find peace. You will find beauty. You will be given dignity through that. You will be given honor through that. You will be given elevation through that. You will be given purpose through that. You will be given meaning through that. Just reminding them about God, and telling them that it's a feeling that you already experience. Those feelings, sometimes it's like we're dedicated to blocking God out. That feeling that that feeling of when you were being awarded that Grammy Award, or when you were starting that new car, whatever, that feeling that I'm not worthy of this, or why is this happening to me, or that is when we feel that, it's suggesting to us that we know that somebody else is in control, man. Somebody else is doing this. This ain't me. Let that feeling lead you to the one that has given you all that you have. Those moments of transcendence when maybe you were in nature and you just felt a harmony in the world. That's God. Those moments of, like I say, deep appreciation, feelings of harmony, that's God. Let that grow. And then when it grows, look to establish an intentional relationship with God. God has not just left us to our feelings about Him. That, I have these feelings and I don't know what to do. God has given us messengers, given us prophets to show us how to bring these feelings to their most righteous and fullest expressions, and follow those. And I would exhort them to learn about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Learn about what he taught. Learn about his life. Because I think for people like that, the example of the Prophet is something that I think they could respond to. Because this is somebody living righteously and living fully. See, one thing I would say to somebody living at that level, man, I'm not telling you I'm not going to even pretend like you're not living a high life. We're not going to pretend like, you're not experiencing things that are wondrous, that you're not experiencing things that are captivating and inspiring, and you're going places and you're doing things. There's a way that you can do that righteously. I'm not telling you to become a monk and give away all of your possessions and, take an oath to poverty, right? I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling you, experience those things beautifully, experience those things righteously. And if you do that, there will be something even better for you on the other side. If you do that, all of these blessings and everything that you have, this will just be a precursor to bigger, greater blessings that are with God when we die and when we meet Him. or we can do it our way, and this will really be the height of our experience.
That's it.
This is it. Yeah, I hope you had a blast.
Yeah.
Because that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And sometimes, I mean, you have to experience the best of this stuff to really, I'm not going to say it's empty, because I think that might be a overgeneralization, but it's definitely limited. I don't care how nice the car is. It's going to get old, man. I don't care how nice the home is. After a while, it'll just be coming home. I don't care how nice, I don't care how delicious the food was, the food that you're Instagramming and look at this, it's still going to end up in the same place.
Yeah.
It's limited. But if you allow those things to be a preview to greater blessing, then I think they're serving you well, man. So I wouldn't turn toward them in any judgmentality. In fact, I would even admit that, look, man, I'm just a little guy from Chicago. I might not even know what it is to be that kind of draw for people. I don't know what that test is like, but no test is too great to prevent you from submitting to your creator. That's probably what I would say.
She got the message, Nicki Minaj, Katy Perry, and anybody else tuning in.
Yeah, definitely. Right.
And I want to thank you. Thank you so much.
Man, thanks for having me, Eddie. It's always a pleasure, man. Continue to support the Dean Show. Look out for us. I am with the American Learning Institute for Muslims. We can be reached at Alim Program, ALIM program.org. We're actually in the midst of our summer program right now, a 3-week study intensive that we do. It's being held at Benedictine University. So anybody who wants to come out, visit us. We'll be there until the 28th. They can come out and visit us. Anybody who wants to, see the work we're doing can check us out online. And it's always a pleasure to be with Eddie, man. Always a pleasure.
It was nice having you on the
Dean
program.
Show. The Dean Show, your consistency, man. Your program is always so consistent. Your style has been consistent for years. And I think because it's so consistent, maybe it's something we take for granted a little bit. So I just want to thank you. Tell you keep up the good work.
Alhamdulillah.
Keep working, man. Keep working.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for tuning into the Dean Show. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave us your takeaways. And those tuning in, you got the message no matter who you are or where you're at. And we'll see you next time here on the Dean Show. Until then, peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum.